Hello and welcome to possibly the ultimate man cave, absolutely surrounded by retro bikes, retro shoes and the helmets. And our guide for this video is Rich.
Hiya.
So this most of it is your personal collection of bikes, shoes, helmets.
We kind of built this space, I suppose. Like anything, our offices are quite clean and tidy and white clean and nice, modern, let's say. And every now and then you need a little bit of messy working and a bit of breakout space that creates the, I suppose, the right environment around product, the touchy-feely stuff, the ones that really gives you the creative juices. And this is this breakout room. So we fitted it with everything. Table made out of scaffolding, out of our display stuff. All the racking from the warehouse that's full of boxes of samples, and probably more importantly, beer fridge. So when always the ideas are all-nighters. But it just meant also you had a great space to be able to stick some of the stuff that meant something to us as individuals and the business as a whole, which is kind of like, which is quite nice. It's become more of a kind of a closed round of old product in here, but quite cool, quite a fun place to be.
And everywhere I look, there's an amazing retro bike with probably an amazing story. And I don't know where to start, but I guess this one here, as this is a bike you keep, if you could only keep one, as you might see in our previous video where we sat down and had a chat about your collecting obsession, shall we say.
That's it.
So what's the story behind this? Why does it mean so much to you? Why is it a bike you would keep?
So this for me, I suppose, brings every part of mountain biking in that early 90 period of time into one build. And I suppose it's the colours, it's the simplicity, no suspension, the big, tough, rugged engineering, the purple, the turquoise, the fluorite, just for everything on this, and probably more pleasing on the eye, just resonates that period of time in one bike perfectly. And for that, it's the one I could look at all day long, I think.
And what year? I mean, 91?
So this is 1990, 91 crossover, there. And it is the Yeti FRO. They're probably keen, sort of the most iconic race bike of their period, before they worked into ARCs and aluminium and the ultimates and stuff. And it's the one that John Tomac rode, but with a drop handlebar. And this build really is beautiful. I've ridden it quite a few times on this one as well.
Okay, quite a bit of wear on the crank. Is that your
a bit of everything. So I bought this bike stateside, and it was a chap who's a keen collector was moving a few on. And I was like, oh my goodness, there we go. That's what I'm pretty sure I would love that in the collection. So I made contact, and I had arranged actually to go and pick it up. And tied in quite nicely with the work trip, as most of these things do. And but that was in early 2000, and we all know what happened at that point. Flying became a bit of a problem, amongst any other things. And it was eventually got shipped to me. I'm going to say probably around April last year. I've done a bit of tinkering.
Okay.
So
such as?
We changed out the hubs to Ringley.
Yep.
From Shimano XT M730s, the product codes, and that just adds a little bit of the touch of purple. QRs have been updated to purple. The Chris King headset, purple, 1.25 inch has gone in. The attack stem and the seat clamp, I've had all the silver hardware anodized black, just to bring a slight touch of modern, I suppose, cleanliness to it. And I changed the saddle out to a turbo light to bring that white touch to.
It's a who's who of iconic brands, isn't it?
It's a pleaser. It's a pleasing to me. It's it's a lovely bike to look at.
And the twin boss occasion down tube.
Like, thinking. There's no logic to some of this stuff.
No,
there really isn't, and most of it's got like probably a story from that period that I have no idea, unfortunately. But like anything in that early 90s period, there were no rules necessarily. You could get away with anything, and for someone to think that the two bottle cages would sit better on the down tube than one on the seat tube and one on the down tube, it doesn't make sense at all. But they did it, and for that, it's quite striking, which is quite smart. But yeah, this is built up of the brands in that period. So Answer were big. So you've got the Acatrax fork, the Attack stem, the taper light bar. You've got the Grafton brakes, the Cook Brothers cranks. Yeah, it's just it's a pleaser.
It's a beauty, isn't it? It's a real showstopper, isn't it? So from that to maybe something a bit more modern,
so
more
yeah,
recognisable to a younger viewer, perhaps.
It's not necessarily stepping back into a DeLorean to make the next step, but this goes into 95.
Okay, the jump forward 4 or 5 years, got rear suspension of sorts.
So this bike played a part in not just cross country, but downhill as well, as that kind of really stepped up from people throwing themselves off a hillside. And this is what you got. You got a Judy DH, a soft tail back end or the active suspension, and full linkages across the back end as well for that generous throw of travel that you've got through that rear damper. But yeah, it was this bike certainly made up, like I say, the latter part of the iconic Yeti racing period.
Yeah.
So the ARC was their aluminium range, and this one tones into the slightly darker yellows from the earlier period. So you've got that and the turquoise mix and the dart finish, they call it, made up with a lot of ringlay. Yeah, we built this. This came up with a very modern XT group set. So taking it back to period was the joy of putting this one together, really.
So you're trying to get the bike back to sort of original spec then, like take the modern stuff off, put the retro stuff on, get it to period correct, basically, for that year as much as possible.
As close as period correct as you can do, and certainly from that, I think you try and find a picture, whether that be something online, a magazine somewhere, and you kind of follow and you chase a little bit of an idea. So there's always a bit of creative interpretation in a lot of these things, but yeah, for me, this really throws up some of that coolness in that sort of mid-90s, and stuff that you think about now that necessarily was hideous as a concept right now, but made a bit of a change back then. You know, grip shift. They've reintroduced that now as well, but through SRAM. But that didn't last. They all snapped and all cracked. So trying to find some new X-rays was a bit of a challenge. And then you just add party pieces. You know, don't leave anything unturned, whether that be turquoised quick releases, turquoise jockey wheels. It was just about how far can you go before it looks ridiculous, then just tone it back a little bit. That's my interpretation. Anyway.
Okay. And probably hard for younger viewers to realise this was state of the art at the time, isn't it? And this is a company driven by racing, trying to develop bikes to win.
Yeah,
downhill and cross country.
Absolutely. I mean, they had some of the stars on their teams, and well, originated from California, but then moved up to Colorado, and that's where they really had their heyday years. They're still based in Colorado now, and they kind of they had the people, I suppose, the US-centric people building these bikes that just become these names in mountain biking that have just stood the test of time, really. But they, this for me is pleasing. It's actually a really quite nice bike to ride. Feels a little bit more modern, so a little bit longer, a little bit more low pro, I suppose a bit more road bike than mountain bike. But the nice part, it's all functional. And so again, trying to get someone out to enjoy this as well as that, and as well as other bikes, and just have this kind of like, you know, can make it some Munster pub excursion, but just it would be pretty cool.
And I spy another Yeti over there, so shall we go and have a look at that one?
Absolutely. This is a 1991 Yeti Ultimate.
Okay.
And Andrew, who our e-commerce manager, Griffiths, is building a Fat Chance U80 anniversary. And these are his wheels for that bike.
Okay.
He built those. The frame and the bike are still taking some time to get ready. So whilst there, he wanted to see them sit in a bike, and it felt right to put them into this. So I would love a disc drive, but they are rare and expensive. So I haven't yet quite got to that challenge. That's something for the list, certainly. But yeah, this is beautiful. 1991. This went through a refurb. Bought it from a chap in Sweden, and it's a frame and fork. It came over here. I sourced the chain set from the bullseye crank from a chap in Italy, and the stem is an FTW, Frank the welder, who's a bit of a Yeti icon from the welding point, and very skilled. That bike made such a big difference to the racing world. So mountain bike action, I believe, played the part in putting the concept of a high stay Yeti together. So basically taking the FRO and putting a high stay into it, thinking that was the way things should go. Whether that's just alleviate some chain slap or whatever it was, you know, there's no logic really. But did it look cool? It certainly did. And that was, again, one of those bikes that had a bit of limelight with John Tomac and things like that, that made it a bit of an icon. So high stay bike needed to be in the collection. So trying to find the right one. Since then, I made a few colour changes, added a turquoise to the fork, turquoise to the stem, and to throw that little touch of Yeti colour in. But no, it's again, that's another pleasing bike. It's a challenge, isn't it? What would you keep?
And they're all so different as well, aren't they? Even though they come from a similar period.
Yeah, yeah.
Like you say, no, there's no boundaries to kind of design and technology back then, was there? Anything could go. Anything did go.
Yeah, completely that, and it's not pigeoned into something at all. It's quite funny because it's you start to find some of these areas and people that you kind of, if I was a stickler for a lot of it, would be like, well, actually, maybe the turquoise is too early. So this was certainly a little bit later in that time, but I was like, that needed to be on there, I think, and it just needed a little bit of colour. It's too easy to do purple, so I could have built a million bikes that looked like the FRO, but I felt like I needed something different in the collection. So this is where we went down the white route, quite a pure build, and certainly quite fun.
So in a way, they're faithful recreations rather than trying to be absolutely correct replicas. Because unless you find like old magazines and adverts, trying to find pictures of these bikes back in the day, we weren't like cataloguing these bikes for the future, were we? Just kind of every week there's a new bike coming out and move on to the next thing.
Completely that, and the variants that exist, and also, I mean, the pictures are so granulated back then as well. It became a real problem for you to get a zoom in. That didn't exist.
And try to get the right colour, the right parts.
So there's a little bit of research really, and that stems into half the fun as well, of trying to find out where and what you're going to set your tone on. It's like, because there's this little play into it. It's like the catalogue might have showed, which you can still find, all of the options of the paint picks. So you stepped in those little route, and then after that it's like, what combinations have you seen? And then you go into that still, and it's like ones you haven't seen. Can you imagine that? And it's just like, so you've got to have a little bit of an imagination really to try and see these things as a finished product. And then it's also a nice surprise when they do come out quite well, versus them just be a little bit like, oh, actually, I've gone overboard there, which does happen.
No, I think that bike looks stunning. They've got all the parts and the smoke and dark tyres, disc drive on the back, bullseye crank. Yeah,
pleasing. Grafton brakes, Grafton levers, and an appeal for this as well for me. I've got, as the wheel set that will sit on this bike, some Mistrals that are being hard anode at the moment, rims on some Ringley hubs as well, in a pewter finish. Again, not quite the period correct colour for that, but I just quite like pewter.
That's fair enough. So from there, I mean, we've got a choice of directions we're going.
It's like the time machine. Which year do you want to go to?
So jump forward or jump back?
That's a small jump forward. We could. This is certainly
a sideways step.
This is a slight. This is more of a sideways. This is 1995.
95. Wow.
Yeah. So not to say we've moved on leaps and bounds here. But this was the Fat Chance Yo Eddie, or still is a Fat Chance Yo Eddie. But the Fat Chance was, I suppose, one of the icons of steel, really. They had a real skill at making this beautiful looking, everything was kind of like to the millimetre finished. Ride quality was very race and surprisingly light, actually, for a period of that time. But what it does have in this iteration here is a bit of a British, I suppose, following that was Dave Hemming, as to name one, but as in there was a few that kind of took this colour tone of green down one side. And
oh wow, it's party trick.
It's party trick. It's a totally different bike on the other. So it's trying to figure out if you're falling out of love with it, do you just spin the bike round?
And the colour matching with the parts, the bars, the brakes, the cranks, the DCD as well.
Oh, completely.
It's on points, isn't it?
I was. It was stated that I might have gone overboard on this by Andy, and I think I have, but I love it. The mix of the turquoises, the purple, all play into there. There's in the geeky world, there's a lot of new old stock onto this bike.
Okay.
So it's finding a lot of these early gems. The Kuka crank, going period correct 95. You've gone away from having XTR M900 to M910.
Yep.
So you've got to make sure the mech's right, the shifters are right. Crystal design brakes, Ringley hubs, and even to the points where you've got the Ringley chain sucker, the Moby post, the Zuka stem. Yeah, it just it's all in. I went all in.
All in.
And
it does look incredible. Have you ridden it? How's it ride?
This one I have not ridden.
Shame. It'd be a shame to get dirty, wouldn't it?
Part of it for not riding, I suppose, is just that it is so mint. And also I've not ridden, I want to sort of enjoy some of the other bikes at some point so as well. So this will get ridden at some stage. I'm just not there yet.
Well, having like 20 retro bikes and then all your modern bikes and having time to ride them all must be
exactly, that's it. It's a full-time occupation. Yeah, I need to take some time out.
So that's a stunning bike. Should we go a bit more
into the time machine?
Into time machine again?
Do you want to go back or
let's jump
we're
forward.
Have to go.
This Marin has caught my attention. Because I remember being very young, going to a bike shop and seeing one of these on the wall, pretty much the same sort of height difference now, and thinking, wow, that's incredible. And it still looks incredible today.
It's so crude, but it works, and I think that's the nice part of it. So this is the first. This is 1993, a Marin's Team FRS, and it's the first time that they did a. So Answer, who did the forks, the Manitou and company, assisted with the development of using their fork technology into a back end. Okay, yeah. Simple. Yeah. It's like
genius.
Yeah,
really,
there we go. Why develop this whole new complicated thing? Let's just set forks and stick them on the back, and that's what they did. So Answer helped them with the development of that. For me, I suppose this was my pin-up. I had a thing about Marin, and my personal connection into Marin is that my first race bike was a 95 Indian Fire Trail at the age of 14. So you know, I was rolling pretty well, and then I ended up, as most things did back then, cracking that. I moved on to a titanium bike that a friend of my father's, a chap called John White, who developed the Mt Visions, kind of let me in that. So I ended up going down this route of just being a Marin fan for life, and this was the bike that I had in the catalogues. I saw in the kind of the early stuff that you could afford. It was just like, I'd love that bike. Yeah. What was it that made it cool? Just the sum of all parts, really. I mean, that's almost catalogue spec, that bike, less the seat post, to which I have a seat post in a box there for it. I've just not swapped it out. But so that is, if you're into your real, the nerdy element of it, going catalogue on something is the dream, the ultimate aim. Yeah. So I've only done that with Marin, and part of me is because some of the publications and the content is all there for it, that you can find that stuff and be pretty sure that you've got the right tyre or the right brake block or the bottom bracket was spec'd in the catalogue spec detail. So that's where that stayed really, whereas others I've gone down the race route just to try and bring that. But yeah, it's pretty clever. That bike came from Poland, so a chap that I chat to every now and then as well. Poland seems to have this wealth of access to some beautiful old bikes.
Interesting.
And much, I suppose, like Germany, a lot of them haven't deteriorated like they did in the UK.
Okay.
Our conditions brutal for bikes, so anything you buy that's had a full UK life and used is probably dead. And so trying to find something that's got some life in it. But he offered this to me after I'd already bought another bike off him, a 1991 Marin Team Marin as a project, and this one he offered up as well, and I was like, well, unicorn bike, I'm in. So,
Was there any, I mean, you clearly like Marins, was there any kind of thought to making a Marin collection rather than this more diverse collection we have here?
it started like that.
Okay.
And I soon to realise that actually the framework of just doing that, and what do I do then? Do I collect the same bike in 4 different colours, or each year combined? And that didn't do it for me. But also I didn't want to be contained by something. I like the whole element of choice and the kind of like all the fun factor of all these brands and what they bring.
Yeah.
So I stepped out of the Marin thing fairly early on, I think. I must have been probably about 4 to 6 bikes in before I went, right, I'm going out. And the seal was broken and the floodgates opened, and it meant that there was a world of excitement out there, mountain bike excitement.
I'm glad you did, because it made an impressive collection. And what's fascinating dealing with bikes together is it shows the progress of technology from, well, rigid bikes to early suspension, and then very rudimentary suspension, to the GT RTS, which is a absolute icon, kind of very early full suspension bike that was pretty decent. Pretty cool. Getting there anyway, it's on the right path.
So again, I mean, this sweet spot I mentioned before, it's like 1993. So that is a 1993 bike, and you just think how to ride, it's amazing. I've ridden this one a fair few times, and I love it to bits. But this went on a bit of a journey, and Ollie, who works at Saddleback, was there with me when I collected it. Again, it was a stateside purchase that we just happened to be able to drive to possibly the roughest part of LA to collect it, off a really nice chap, and we spent a bit of time with reminiscing, and parked it into the car, and then took it back, got it on the plane and brought it back. And it was like, that started the story about rebuilding this, an early piece. So yeah, 91 was there. It's one of the first iterations of the RTS team. So early race bike, in theory, stems around that. How did I build it? I went down the route of it being a little bit cross-country race. The reality is this is where that period of time they started to do downhill and cross-country on bikes. So it's quite often you'd see a downhill racer with a set of bar ends on their bike, which you think, well, they're for climbing, why is it there? But they still like the whole stretch out thing. And the suspension system works, both forks and rear shock work quite well. Öhlins rear shock, RockShox Mag 21 forks. Yeah. And you just, I can't imagine hurtling myself down a mountain on it.
I can't know, because it's a unified rear triangle, so it locked out when you stood up.
Yeah.
Which is the last thing you want when you're descending, you stood up and it locks out.
Completely that. And that system works. It's like, it's just the weight, the cam underneath for the rear back end and the way the shock's thrown. It's just, it does completely stop the damper from moving. But I got carried away, and a lot of this, I mean, purple was such the colour. It was like everything else had a nice appearance, but I just think my affection, I'm pretty sure the masses out there, for purple or 3DV was kind of there. So I went a little bit mad again by just bolting on a whole load of purple. Control Tech, one of the sponsors of the time for the GT team. Stem, handlebar, gone X-Lite with the bar ends, so a little bit off piece there, but DCD into the mix, top line, so the Grafton crank with all engineering crank bolts. Yeah, it's
and the jockey wheels, buying like coloured jockey wheels, a thing back then as well, wasn't it?
Oh, completely. So they're Bullseye. Bullseye were pretty big in their jockey wheels. Did a load of colours. And then the spin wheels, you couldn't have a GT without a set of spins, and that was the perfect bike for that. That's the only GT I've got in the collection, actually. I did have a Zaskar, but I I parted ways with the Zascar. I don't know why now. You ask yourself these questions after you've done it always. Why did I do that? But I think for me, that certainly was GT's finest moment. Yeah, there's certainly there's more history to come in sort of the years that followed. But for me, that was a striking point. And Jason McRoy raced an RTS as well in his early days in that same period.
I think the spin wheels just set off really, don't they? I mean, when you're a teenager, looking at bike with those sort of wheels on.
Oh, completely. Wow. It's BMX growing up, isn't it?
Isn't it?
So, yeah, from what, 20 to 26. And yeah, I just, it's a very pleasing bike to look at. So pleasing, in fact, I just bought another one.
Another one? Coming soon. So 1993, where should we leap to next? What else have we got? We've got a nice pace up there.
Yep, hidden in the rafters. So we're in we're still in 1993. It's
so
like
1993 is emerging a bit of a kind of key year.
There's a bit of a time machine
for you as well.
Yeah, it's like that stickler of a time machine. I think it's just that was such the sweet spot for developing the stuff. And I realise now when you're kind of buying through a load of product that you're going down the American route. Mountain biking really kind of stemmed from the US, and the brands were there. They were living the kind of the full mountain bike lifestyle, and a lot of stuff was developing very quickly. So I felt like I needed a British bike in there. And I got a few choices, but I went down the Pace route because the Pace had for me, the true racing route. And also, I just think from a striking perspective, it wasn't a still or lugged bike. And having that box section tubing and just the engineering, I suppose, that went into kind of like the fork, the early carbon fibre of that RC35 was just like, no one was really doing that. It also gave me a great place to home a lot of the British brands. We've got Hope tie glides on there, Middleburn RS1 chain set, USE in the way of the seat post. It's got Pace rental bar and then X-Lite bar ends, and at the moment it's currently got a Control Tech stem in there. But I will be hunting for the Pace version of that at some point.
Okay, yeah. Like I say, the engineering is on show as well, isn't it? With the external machining and the rectangular tubes, which weren't ever used back then, were they? So
not at all. I have not ridden that bike yet. That's one of the ones I've not pedalled. Why, I don't know. It will happen for sure, but possibly because it's high up. But it's, I want to know what that ride's like. Yeah. I never rode one, and I can only at this point there thinking I need to secure my fillings before I head off down the trail. But it's pretty cool to look at the same time. There's loads of things. I mean, that goes back to having 2 bottle cage bolts on the down tube. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
So just one British bike, would you see more in your collection, or is it very much the American influence is key in the collection? And
I do like the idea of sticking another British bike in there. Yeah. What that is, I don't know. It's quite easy for me to probably pick out a Chaz Roberts Dog's Bollocks or something like that.
That's an obvious one, isn't it?
And have that in there. Does it do it for me? That's the question I've started to ask myself now. It's like, that would be nice to have in the collection, because for someone, the pleasure would be there. But now it's almost like, where's my pleasure out of these things coming, or appreciation? So, not to say I've matured into my purchasing habits, because I think it's still a little bit of a, wild, wild west.
You have a criteria for your bikes, don't you?
Yeah.
And it's based on your teenage years, following the sport, the heritage, racing success. Racing is a key thing. I mean, racing was key to mountain biking back then, wasn't it?
Completely that.
Key for you.
I mean, it shaped my whole life. Yeah. That's the beauty of it, and not just from me pedaling for freedom and adventure with my friends to then do my first race at 15, and the bug was then set. It was like I was well into it. I did mountain biking all the way up until the point that I think 2004, 2005, that period. I think Further Mouth was early 2000, wasn't it? That caused a bit of a problem. And setback, and I realised I couldn't earn a living out of it, so I had to get a real job. and thankfully, the sponsor at the time with Felt Bicycles through Saddleback, Andy, was very kind to offer me a job, and that's where I've been ever since.
That worked out okay, isn't it?
It's been all right, isn't it? Gives me a house for all my bikes.
Let's have a look at this Cannondale over here. Well, that's another. There's probably a step back.
So that's 1991.
91.
Yeah. The beauty of this is this Cannondale had such a flair for being so radical in a point of like they're one for a lot of engineering firsts and probably don't get the same credibility for that as some of the brands that had such a short shelf life of their heyday, as it were. You know, Yeti wasn't around for a huge period of time. People love the fringes of their history stories, but actually it was quite a short period of time. Cannondale's been around for so long, and this 1991, it's an SE 2000. I picked this up stateside as well. Seems to be a theme here, but they've got a lot of this old lovely junk, and the colours and the bravado of this, just the loudness. Is quite cool, even down to the point where it's a speckled black paint finish, and then the fluoro pops are still there in all their beauty. So, but this went through again the same. I bought this as a frame. Shouldn't have really had a Manitou M1 on, but should have had a Gervin flex stem and one of their early rigid forks. But it felt right to put a fork on there. So that's gone in there with a Brody mount on, full XT black M730 Grupo.
Stuck around. Just imagine how long the stems are on these old bikes.
That's a casual 150 mil.
150 mil.
It's like,
We're getting a road bike now, but well.
Yeah, well, my road bike stem's shorter than that. It's
funny seeing the high pivot way back then, and that's coming back into fashion now on motorbikes. So
completely
full circle maybe.
We talk about that earlier, and it's like having a jockey wheel just here, and you've kind of got the prototype, haven't you? But it's such a cool bike to look at, and if anything goes, and I like the fact that some people aren't necessarily a big fan of this, and certainly Andy in Saddleback is a stickler for. He's if all the bikes he would want to move out of his sight would be this one.
Oh, really?
And I think possibly because I went a little bit wild, but in colours.
There aren't many companies that have a bar, but we're here in a bar.
I think we've got two, but yeah.
Two, and even the bottle opener is retro themed as well.
Exactly that. I sent that by a friend, and he thought it had a purpose with us. Unknowingly, we had a bar, or we built the bar around it. But yeah, this early Cooks Brothers racing crank arm that's never been threaded, never done anything, part of a sort of a display piece for them back at that period of time, is now our bottle opener.
Very cool.
So it's a good enough reason to have a bar, really.
Yeah, definitely. Let's talk bikes. And in front of us is a Super V 3000, it says on the top tube there.
It does indeed.
So let me guess, 93?
93.
Oh, what a good guess.
What a sweet spot. Like, there's a theme, isn't there?
And this, I remember when this, well, I don't remember when it came out, I remember these bikes was the era because they were, I mean, they still look radical. The shape of frame, full suspension, what, head shock on the front?
Head shock,
and
yeah.
Dial to...
Look at that, pepperoni fork, head shock. You could
bar ends that you could ski with.
Like, they're ridiculously long, aren't they? So, yeah, this is that whole, that period where Cannondale really got on top of just, you know, the happy pills.
They're on it, weren't they?
Their designers were pushing boundaries.
Every week a new bike coming out, it seems.
It's like they're mixing up moto with mountain bike and really kind of trying to just develop the stuff that made a riding a little bit more enjoyable. This is a pogo to ride, it really is, but it's so cool to look at. And they did something that no one else, I mean, this design went for them until the fork developed a little bit, everything developed a little bit, but up until, what, late 90s.
Wow,
certainly into that period.
Yeah, a decade.
The Volvo racing team and stuff like that were on there. But 93, black, purple anno, really cleared up. So this is a lot of catalogue product on this bike as well, which is quite nice. There's a few changes and tweaks into it, but down from the Coda competition product, the bar ends Coda based. The only things that differ out of here from catalogue, I believe, are the quick release skewers and the going down to the Syncross tie seat post. And then it's just had a little bit of purple jewellery added to give that theatrical point.
Bit of sparkle.
Bit of sparkle. But I mean, this bike was madness. It still is madness, and that's why I love it. I really do.
And then we step forward in time, but kind of back in technology, because it looks like not as adventurous as
Pretty
Cannondale.
simple, isn't it?
Very simple, yeah.
Pretty simple. I mean, this for me and the Marin connection runs deep, but I think this for me personally was a point where I took to mountain biking in a competitive way. So this was my first race bike.
Okay, yeah.
And I had at the age of 14, rolled up to an event, and a local one, Cornbury Park, out in Oxfordshire, and raced away. And I was like, I love this, love it. 2 laps I had to do. I was a youth at the time. And I set the fastest lap of all the competitions of that day in lap number 1. Lap 2, I'd blown up so badly that I crawled across the line. I remember I turned up with a bum bag full of tools, didn't know what I needed, so I packed everything. And I had an orange bicycles jersey and a pair of baggy shorts over my lycra shorts, because I wasn't, didn't know quite the etiquette at that stage. Needed the confidence. But yeah, this was pretty much how I raced it. In its makeup. It's fresh out of catalogue with the update of the Manitou forks. And this was a rebuild. So I bought a few of these over time. We were trying to find a good one. So this has been full machine, hand polished and coated over the top, because it had a lacquer that just deteriorated over time to bring it back to life. A lot of good memories from that.
Yeah.
Didn't last too long, it cracked. Lighter.
And then we step forward again to something that looks really cool, I think. I mean, head shock at the front, bright red frame.
Yeah, slammed. So this is kind of fresh off the Tingueres kind of faux, the Volvo Cannondale guys, and 1998 this one runs through. Yeah. So there's a little bit out on this. This is George, who's our Southeast sales manager.
Okay.
And
it's not yours then?
No.
You're looking after it?
We're looking after it here. Yeah. Let's say in the museum. That's becoming the home for these old beautiful things. But yeah, he's given this a lot of love and care over. This moves into V-brakes, and having Coda develop a lot of the products in sort of the technology, bar, stem, chain set. Cannondale did some radical things then, but this was cutting edge, super light bike.
It's still pretty light by today's standards as well.
Yeah. So, and a huge amount of World Cup success that kind of stemmed from this bike. So, and I think for a lot of us, even you see now Cannondale redid, one of those brands that likes to be a little bit adventurous. They redid the FSI, the latest carbon bike, hardtail, in the old classic paint jobs, the red with the yellow and the blue with the yellow as well from the Volvo Cannondale days.
And then we go forward again. This is 99.
This is 1999.
Is this the youngest bike in your collection, should we say?
It probably is, certainly versus in that, let's put it in the retro category for sure. Okay, and some people, certainly the Uber geeks out there, might say that this isn't retro at all.
Is there a cut-off for retro then? 2000, is that?
96 roughly.
Okay,
it's that movement from canties to V-brakes tends to be the theme. But for me, I mean, this bike, for my growing up, the one that I raced, and the bike that changed the history, or wrote the history books really.
Well,
certainly not just in UK mountain bike, but overall, wouldn't it? That was the first win for a full suspension bike in a UCI cross-country race, so the National Mountain Bike Championships in the UK, and Paul Lazenby rode this to victory. And I mean, it was cool. That was just a cool period of time.
And I think apart from things like the brakes, we don't have disc brakes now, it looks the most modern bike in it. It really shows the evolution of bikes from like the early 90s and how far they've come in just 10 years, or less than 10 years, to a bike that it doesn't look dissimilar to more modern bikes, give or take a few changes here and there. And a bike you probably could ride now.
Oh, completely that, comfortably as well. And I mean, you got to the point there where you're almost disc brake ready at the rear in that newer back end. And I think they did a lot of that for that back end, might have gone through some of the iterations of the downhill bikes for the B17s and things like that in that period. But yeah, this was pretty cool. And I for me, the Mt Vision Pro and the personal collection, a good friend of my father's is chap John White, who designed and developed this.
Just a bit name dropping there.
So yeah, exactly. And but he's just he changed the curve here, and the suspension system that worked. It pedalled and it was active at the same time, and yeah, fun. I really like that bike.
Yeah.
A lot of happy memories, but I couldn't stop at one.
So yeah, you've got another one over there.
Two.
Let's go and have a look at that. So it's actually a bit earlier. We can tell by the swing arm is different, so experts will recognise the difference in the swing arm there.
Exactly. So this is 1998. Now I desperately wanted a 99 one because that was the year that I rode one, and I was like, I'd love the colourway, but I picked up a 98 in the interim. And for me, I'm now at a point where I'm not sure which one I prefer. It's just a weird point. Not that I really need to clean out the collection at all, but yeah, this is the 1998 one. Box section, back end, like you mentioned. They changed that later onto the tubing because I think there was a lot more stress went through that back end. And this one's built up with the M950 rapid rise of that period. So the mech that went the opposite way to your natural shifting thinking. So everything you'd learned had to be relearned, to which then they changed back to normal. But no, it's a really good looking bike, I think, out of all these for that period of time.
Do you feel bad about having two bikes that are so close in your collection?
I can't, I'm sat on the fence of which one I love the most, to which means I've got to keep both of them, because the minute I get rid of one, no reason need to get rid of any, but it means that I'd miss the one I don't have, so they need to sit there together, and just the personal connection to the two is enough to keep both of them, I think.
Fair enough reason. And one thing all these bikes have in common, I noticed, as we've been going through them, is the Flite saddle.
Flite.
Was there no other saddle back then you could have?
There was definitely saddles, and these are all Flites, aren't they? So certainly on some of the other bikes, you'll get in a mix. We've got a turbo up there. That's running a traditional Marin. It's gone down the catalogue spec. And some of the other points, I've got Avocets saddles into some of the bikes. Some of the Marins have got their stock product as well. But yeah, it's such an iconic saddle, to the point where they do remakes now, and you can still buy them. And on the 95 Indian Fire Trail is a remake version. You can always tell by the step in the tie bar versus the complete flat line of the originals. But they're all date stamped. So if you get down to the nitty gritty, you need the correct date stamp for the correct model bike to the correct period. So it gets, that's the fun part. You need a plethora of saddles.
Yeah. Well, it's been a lot of fun going through your collection, and I appreciate you sharing your collection.
Pleasure.
We also feel very privileged to have seen it, and hopefully you've all enjoyed watching this video. And if you want to see the other video where we sat down and had a chat about his collection, you can see that link down below. And if you also have a bike collection, well, I'd love to hear from you, so leave a comment down below. That's all for now. Thank you so much for sharing
My
all this with us, and hopefully you enjoyed it. And we'll see you all again next time. Thanks for watching.